What happened when a 9-year-old girl living on the streets entered an upscale restaurant in search of food? Laura, a 9-year-old girl, walked slowly down the sidewalk, her bare feet carefully avoiding puddles. The streets, usually bustling, were quieter today. Passers-by rushed to find shelter as a light rain fell, and Laura had nowhere to go. Her stomach growled with hunger, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. Her big, expressive eyes scanned the shop windows, dreaming of what could be. That's when she spotted the Golden Star restaurant, one of the most elegant places in the city. For a moment, Laura hesitated. She knew she didn't belong to this world of luxury and refinement, but hunger prevailed. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy glass door and entered. The contrast between the cold street and the warm, cozy restaurant made her shiver. The interior of the Golden Star was stunning. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting a soft light over tables dressed with immaculate white tablecloths. The sound of clinking cutlery and polite conversation filled the air. Laura felt immediately out of place, her ragged clothes and disheveled hair clashing with the elegance around her. As she timidly walked between the tables, Laura could feel the gazes of the diners. Some ignored her completely, as if she were invisible. Others gave looks of disapproval or discomfort. An elderly lady whispered something to her companion, casting a disapproving glance at Laura. The girl swallowed hard, struggling against the tears that threatened to fall. She was used to rejection, but that didn't make the experience any less painful. Still, she continued towards the counter, where a waiter in a tuxedo watched her with a concerned expression. "Excuse me, sir," Laura said softly, her voice barely audible above the restaurant's din. The waiter leaned in to hear her better. "Could you give me a little bit of food? I'm very hungry." The man looked genuinely troubled. He glanced around as if seeking help or approval from someone. "Look, dear," he began, his voice gentle but firm. "This is a very fine restaurant. We can't just give away food. Maybe you could try somewhere else." Laura felt her heart sink. She nodded sadly, turning to leave. It was then that she felt a hand on her shoulder. Startled, she turned around to find herself face to face with a middle-aged woman whose eyes sparkled with a mix of compassion and something more. Curiosity, perhaps. "Wait a moment," said the woman. "I think we can sort this out." The woman who approached Laura was Antonietta Santana, the owner of the Golden Star restaurant. At 45, Antonietta was a respected figure in the culinary world, known for both her culinary talent and her generosity. That afternoon, she was seated at her usual table, observing the restaurant's activity, when she noticed Laura's entrance. Something about the small, fragile figure of the girl touched Antonietta deeply. As she watched Laura interact with the waiter, memories of her own difficult childhood flooded her mind. She remembered days without food, cold nights, and the constant feeling of not belonging anywhere. It was this memory that prompted her to get up and intervene. "Hello, little one," Antonietta said, kneeling to be at Laura's eye level. "My name is Antonietta. What's yours?" Laura hesitated, years of distrust making her recoil slightly. But there was something in Antonietta's gentle smile that made her relax a little. "Laura," she replied softly. Antonietta nodded. "Laura, qué nombre bonito. Dime, Laura, ¿te gusta la pasta?" Laura, los ojos de la niña se abrieron de par en par. "Tell me, Laura," y asintió vigorosamente. The girl's eyes widened and she nodded vigorously. Antonietta a su alrededor. A warm sound that seemed to warm the space around la mejor pasta de la ciudad. "Great. ¿Qué te parece probar un poco?" "Happen to make the best pasta in town pudiera responder, how about su estómago rugió audiblemente. Before Laura could respond, her stomach growled loudly, sin embargo, causing her to blush. Sonrió aún más ampliamente. Antonietta, however, just smiled even more broadly. "Ven conmigo." Antonietta extendió la mano hacia Laura, quien, después de un momento de vacilación, la aceptó. Who after a moment of hesitation took Antonietta, que la guió amablemente hasta su mesa. Los demás clientes observaban la escena con una mezcla de curiosidad y desaprobación, pero Antonietta los ignoró por completo. Carlos llamó a Antonietta a uno de los camareros. "Por favor, trae un plato de nuestro mejor espagueti a la boloñesa para mi joven invitada aquí." As they waited for the food, Antonietta started chatting with Laura, asking simple questions about her favorite things and dreams. At first, The girl responded with monosyllables, still wary, but gradually, encouraged by the genuine kindness in Antonietta's eyes, she began to open up. Laura told about her life on the streets, how she had lost her parents in an accident 2 years earlier, and how she had been surviving ever since. She spoke of her fears, her small joys, and her dreams of having a home again. Antonietta listened attentively, her heart breaking with each word. When the pastor arrived, Laura's eyes lit up in a way Antonietta would never forget. She ate with a mix of hunger and delight, savoring each bite as if it were the last. Antonietta watched her, an idea beginning to form in her mind. After the meal, Antonietta made a decision that would change their lives forever. "Laura," she said gently, "how about we take a walk? I know a place where you can rest tonight, and tomorrow we can talk more about how I can help you." Laura looked at Antonietta, a mix of hope and fear in her eyes. After a moment, she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Antonietta smiled, standing up and extending her hand again to Laura. Together, they left the restaurant, leaving behind the curious glances of the other diners. As they walked to the car, Antonietta knew her life was about to change drastically. But looking at the small figure beside her, she felt she was doing exactly what she was meant to do. Antonietta and Laura walked through the city streets to a small family-run hotel not far from the restaurant. The establishment, though simple, was clean and welcoming. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Amelia, listened attentively to Antonietta and promised to take care of the girl. "Laura," Antonietta said gently, "you'll stay here tonight. Mrs. Amelia will take care of you, and I'll be back to pick you up tomorrow morning, okay?" The girl nodded, still a bit apprehensive, but the exhaustion in her eyes was evident. Antonietta accompanied her to the room, making sure she was comfortable before saying goodbye. The next morning, as promised, Antonietta returned. She brought new clothes for Laura and took her to breakfast at a nearby bakery. The girl devoured the fresh bread and hot chocolate as if it were the most delicious thing she had ever tasted. After breakfast, Antonietta took Laura to a shelter run by a friend of hers, Maria, a dedicated social worker. "Laura," she explained, "Maria will take care of you for a few days while I take care of some important things. Do you trust me?" Laura hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. Something in Antonietta's gaze made her feel safe for the first time in a long while. The days at the shelter were a revelation for Laura. She took warm showers, slept in a soft bed, and had regular meals. The other children initially intimidated her, but soon she made friends, especially a girl named Anna, who helped her adapt to the routine of the place. Maria watched Laura closely, noticing how the girl slowly began to smile more and open up. She kept Antonietta informed about Laura's progress, and the woman visited whenever she could, bringing small gifts and spending hours talking with the girl. A week later, Antonietta arrived with news that would change everything. "Laura," she said, her eyes shining with emotion, "I've talked to many important people in the past few days. Lawyers, judges, social workers, and well, if you want, I would like to take you to live with me." Laura was silent for a long moment, processing the information. "Live with you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Antonietta nodded. "Yes, in my home. You would have your own room, go to school, and I would take care of you. What do you think?" Tears began to roll down Laura's face before she could respond. She threw herself into Antonietta's arms, sobbing with joy and relief. Antonietta hugged her tightly, feeling her own tears forming. Maria watched the scene with an emotional smile. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also saw the beginning of something beautiful and transformative. That afternoon, Laura left the shelter hand in hand with Antonietta. They stopped at several shops along the way, buying new clothes, school supplies, and even a few toys. Laura could hardly believe that all of this was for her. When they finally arrived at Antonietta's home, a spacious apartment in a quiet neighborhood, Laura was amazed. Antonietta took her on a tour of the entire place, ending in what would be Laura's room. "This is your space now, Laura," she said gently. "You can decorate it however you like, make it your own little corner." Laura looked around the room, gently touching the soft bed, the colorful curtains, the desk where she would do her homework. Then she turned to Antonietta, her eyes full of an emotion she could barely express. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging Antonietta once again. Antonietta smiled, stroking the girl's hair. "Welcome to your new home, Laura," she said. "We're just beginning our journey together." That night, while Laura slept soundly in her new bed, Antonietta stayed awake for a long time, reflecting on how her life had changed in just a week. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but looking at the closed door of Laura's room, she felt an absolute certainty that she had made the right decision. In the following weeks, Laura and Antonietta adjusted to their new life together. There were moments of joy, such as when Laura learned to make pancakes for breakfast, and moments of challenge, like when she had nightmares about her past on the streets. Antonietta was always there, offering support, patience, and unconditional love. One evening, about a month after Laura moved in, Antonietta decided it was time to share her own story. After dinner, she invited Laura to sit with her on the balcony, where they had a stunning view of the illuminated city. "Laura," Antonietta began, her voice soft, "do you remember when we met at the restaurant? You must have wondered why I decided to help you." The girl nodded, her curious eyes fixed on Antonietta. Antonietta took a deep breath and began her story. "When I was about your age, my life wasn't much different from yours. My parents died when I was young, and I ended up on the streets." Laura's eyes widened in surprise. Antonietta continued, "I went through hunger, cold, and fear. I slept in alleys, ran away from people who wanted to hurt me. There were days I thought I wouldn't survive." Laura listened attentively, recognizing in Antonietta's words the experiences she had lived herself. "One day," Antonietta went on, "I walked into a small restaurant, starving and desperate. The owner, a man named Antonio, saw me. But instead of sending me away, he offered me a plate of food." Antonietta smiled as she remembered. "Antonio and his wife, Clara, had no children. They took me in, gave me a home, sent me to school. It wasn't easy at first. I was scared, distrustful, sometimes even angry. But they never gave up on me." Tears began to form in Antonietta's eyes. "They taught me everything about cooking, about running a restaurant. More importantly, they taught me about love, family, and second chances." Laura moved, took Antonietta's hand. She squeezed it gently before Antonietta continued. "When Antonio got sick, he left me the restaurant. I promised him that I would always help children like I once was. And then, that night at the restaurant, when I saw you, it was like seeing myself again." Antonietta looked directly into Laura's eyes. "I want to give you the same thing Antonio and Clara gave me, a chance, a home, a family. I know it won't always be easy, but I promise I'll be here for you no matter what." Laura, now crying openly, threw herself into Antonietta's arms. "Thank you," she whispered through her sobs. "Thank you for saving me." Antonietta hugged her tightly, her own tears falling. "No, Laura," she said softly. "We saved each other." They stayed like that for a long time, embraced under the stars. When they finally parted, there was a new understanding between them, a bond strengthened by shared truth and the promise of a future together. That night, before falling asleep, Laura took a piece of paper and a pencil. Carefully, she drew 3 figures, herself, Antonietta, and a heart connecting them. Below, in her childish handwriting, she wrote, "My new family." She placed the drawing on her bedside table, falling asleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. Months passed and Laura and Antonietta settled into a comfortable and loving routine. Laura started attending the local school, where she initially struggled to adjust. But with Antonietta's constant support and her new friends, she soon began to flourish academically. Antonietta, in turn, balanced her time between running the restaurant and caring for Laura. She hired a trusted housekeeper, Mrs. Cecilia, to help when she needed to work late, but always made sure to be present for Laura's important moments. One day, about 6 months after Laura arrived, Antonietta decided it was time to take the next step. She planned a special day, taking Laura to the zoo, her favorite place in the city. As they walked between the enclosures, observing the animals, Antonietta's heart raced with anticipation. Finally, they stopped in front of the penguin habitat, Laura's favorite animals. Antonietta knelt to be at Laura's eye level, holding her small hands in hers. "Laura," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "these past few months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought so much joy, so much love into my world, and I hope I've done the same for you." Laura nodded vigorously, her eyes shining. Antonietta continued, "I've been thinking a lot about this and, well, Laura, I'd like to ask you something very important." She paused, taking a deep breath. "Would you like to officially become my daughter? I'd like to adopt you if you want. This time we've spent together has made me realize that we truly are a family, and I've been given the approval to adopt you officially." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Laura stood still, her eyes wide, fixed on Antonietta. For a terrible moment she feared she might have made a mistake, moved too quickly. But then, Laura's face lit up with the brightest smile Antonietta had ever seen. Tears of joy began to stream down her face as she threw herself into Antonietta's arms, almost knocking her over. "Yes!" she shouted, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, yes, yes!" Antonietta hugged her tightly, feeling her own tears fall. The people around them looked on with curiosity, some smiling as they witnessed the touching moment. "Can I call you Mommy now?" Laura asked timidly when they finally separated. Antonietta felt her heart expand with love. "Of course you can, my daughter," she replied, her voice full of emotion. In the days that followed, Antonietta began the formal adoption process. Finally, after months of waiting and preparation, the big day arrived. Laura and Antonietta dressed in their finest clothes and went to the courthouse. The room was full, restaurant friends, Laura's teachers, even some of the children from the shelter where she had stayed initially. When the judge banged the gavel, officially declaring the adoption, the room erupted in applause. Laura leaped into Antonietta's arms, now officially her mommy, both crying and laughing at the same time. "Welcome to the family, Laura Santana," Antonietta whispered in her ear. That night, they had a big celebration at the restaurant. Laura, radiant in her new dress, ran between the guests, proudly introducing her mom to everyone. Antonietta watched, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. Later, when the party was over and they returned home, Laura asked to sleep in Antonietta's room. Lying side by side, mother and daughter looked up at the ceiling, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them here. "Mommy?" Laura said softly. "Yes, my daughter." "Thank you for choosing me." Antonietta turned to her, gently kissing her forehead. "No, Laura, thank you for choosing me as well. We found each other and that's the most important thing." Laura smiled, snuggling closer to her mom. Together they fell asleep, no longer two lonely souls, but a family united by love and the hope of a bright future. How did this story touch your heart? What actions can you take today to make a difference in someone's life? Remember, sometimes all it takes is a moment of courage to change a life forever. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories like this one. Together, we can create a world where every child has a loving home and every adult has the chance to be a daily hero. Click on the card to keep watching our stories. Until the next video.